just wanna make get it peace. Yeah, I was a wild child.
Winter came, winds cold and mean. Hollywood whispered thoughts so obscene. Where my hot chicks, where my home. Open your gun like yakety
Hey, Roadhog Kennel. Good to see you, buddy. Everett Sanchez. This is Sanchez. What's up? What's up, y'all?
Electric.
Real odds and evens. Okay, I definitely know you. You get a wrench, and that's so that you can go around and hook up with everybody else, as you know already. I'm just playing my love affair with Hollywood, a song that I wrote that Chevy more put it together from my comments than anything. I kind of half wrote the lyrics. On the lookout for some new sheets of hair. So much of this music is so ridiculously good, y'all. Now, I know it's difficult to pick out between, he's got so much of it now. I have an issue sometimes where I'm just like, man, I can't pick out the gems as easily because you're coming out with like 5 songs a day, which that's fine though. He's obviously got a muse in him that's just screaming to be let out, and he's gotta vent that somehow. That creative energy somehow. Jamming. Hello. Getting ready to talk about Missing 411, by the way. I'm just taking a couple quick puffs and jibber jabbering about nothing, looking at comments, seeing if anybody has any immediate questions or comments that things they want to talk about. By the way, rest in peace, Swamp Fox News. I guess he gave into the cancer yesterday. That's terrible news. I didn't know that he had cancer, but I also haven't watched a whole ton of his stuff. But I know that he was well liked and well respected, and he was a soldier, like so many people in this community. And so rest in peace, Swamp Fox News. And everybody out there, if you can right now, take a puff for Swamp Fox News and for me, so I don't have to feel like I'm like some kind of a rug addict just sitting here weaving rugs on my own, doing rugs on my own. Let's see how many people. 13 people. Continuing the missing 411 subject today. Here shortly. Just letting everybody get in here, getting myself all rippered up, ready to go, ready to give myself the gift of plant medicine gab here. I did make a few notes today too, so I'm going to try to be a little more organized in my talk about missing 411. I mentioned yesterday most of the background of it, how he came to be studying the subject. He got a tip from some park rangers, called his cop buddies on the way home and was like, hey, I got this weird tip, will you look into this? And they got back and see if there's anything to it, and they came back very quickly and said, oh boy, there's something to this. And it's big, and it's nothing that anyone's ever talked about. And what that ended up being is clusters of missing people under strange circumstances in national parks. Hey, Sly Shy. Good to see you. Sly Shy is an OG. Everyone welcome her in. Everyone make sure and get over and subscribe to her, and get over and subscribe to each other. Everyone here should be subscribed to everybody else that comes in here that's got a blue wrench, at least. And yeah, so clusters of missing people. It's not just... The clusters actually occur not just geographically, but also in time. So you'll see 5 people might disappear over a 20-year period here in Yosemite, and then it'll kind of move over a little ways, and in another state nearby, you'll have 3 or 4 disappearances that fit this criteria over 10, 20-year period, just long enough for maybe a law enforcement contingent of people to retire and come out, and then it goes back to where it was before. Things like that happen a lot. Now, there are certain places like Pennsylvania is an entire state, is an entire cluster state. It's the only state that's a cluster, and it's children, just like you mentioned there, Sly Shy. That makes up a lot of the Pennsylvania disappearances. Although there's also the Bennington Triangle there in Pennsylvania, and a number of disappearances that have happened around there, and all kinds of weird things. Pennsylvania is an extremely don't recognize that name, but just behave yourself for a few minutes and I'll mod you up too. Any UFOs yet? Not. I haven't ever seen a UFO that I mean, you know, things happen and we see things, and then they're not just absolutely concrete, like in our face. Even if it's something that's kind of impossible, we tend to just kind of block it out. For example, I often will tell people, no, I've never had any ghost experiences or anything like that, but that's really not true. I heard somebody walking around upstairs in my house one day, and I went up there and I thought that there was someone else in the bathroom, and things were getting thrown around in the bathroom, and I walk over there and there's nobody in the bathroom. I mean, I wasn't thinking ghosts, spirits, anything like that, whatever. I was just blown away, and there was still like this little thing rolling on the floor, which had been thrown multiple times. It couldn't have fallen multiple times, the same thing. Like it had rolled and then been kicked or something. Something was throwing a minor tantrum in the bathroom, and there was nobody in there. So anyways, I just tend to forget that. Also, just the other day, somebody smacked me on the freaking bum while I was asleep, laying face down. That's one of, and then the other one is when I was a real little kid, my teddy bear kicked its leg one day, and I do now believe that happened. Because I've never had any hallucinations since then or anything like that, other than when I was just out of a coma in the hospital, and they had me on a whole bunch of the F word pain reliever because I'd been in surgery for like 6 days straight, and it made me hallucinate. But other than that, I've never had any hallucinations or anything like that, so I believe now that it was real. Although I was raised in an atheist house. Went to university for 8.5 years or whatever, so I really was mostly only exposed to atheism and agnostics at very best. Although I always was kind of, even from a pretty young age, I was already willing to say I don't know. I didn't just go around going, I'm an atheist, I just was like, more agnostic. I just don't know what to say, And even in university too, my main degree, my main area of study was philosophy. So of course I have somewhat of that open mind where I'm wanting to say I don't know rather than I know this or I know that isn't true or is true or whatever. But anyways, we tend to just block these things out when they happen to us. And I don't remember seeing any UFOs. However, it may be that I've been on a camping trip at some point or out fishing, night fishing, and seen something, and I'm just forgetting it. Kind of seems like that's the case, actually. But these are the things of our lives, and especially when you're in that frame of mind of being more on the atheist side and whatnot, and you've been raised in that environment, you really tend to write those things off. So who knows what I wrote off over the years that actually happened to me. Can you be Catholic and still believe in UFOs? Well, I'm fairly certain that the Catholic Church has a huge section in its library, in its secret little, not secret library, it's known of, but it's restricted. Very few people can view it. I'm pretty darn sure there's some pretty reliable people who've come out of there and said that there's an entire UFO artifacts room there. And the Catholic Church, I think the Catholic Church is the church that came out and actually acknowledged the likelihood of extraterrestrials, didn't it? Just a number of years ago. Pretty darn sure it did. So I can't exactly answer that question for you, but I do, if I remember correctly, the Catholic Church did come out and say that they either believe there are extraterrestrials or could be, acknowledge that there could be. The Catholic Church is also the church which I mentioned the other day, which had debated the whether dogmens had souls. They spent a couple hundred years or over 100 years debating that issue, whether they had souls and therefore they could be saved or not. And Saint Christopher was the saint, the dog-headed saint, the dogman saint. And so he kind of, oh, Chevy, Chevy. You need a moderator stat. Everybody, make sure and get over and we're listening to Chevy's music right now. Actually, we're listening to this is Who Is This Weekend guy, which many of you will be familiar with from my channel. How about the Love Bunny Fluff, huh? What do you say about that? Or do you have a suggestion? Chevy, Jim, Freedom Fighter, you rock. No grass was in that area. Let's see. I've seen a large circle in a public park that made me stop and question what it could have been. No grass was in that area. Interesting. Almost like something had landed there and killed the grass off. That's very interesting. Sly Shy is XX Geo's girlfriend now, apparently. That's cool. I have like 4 or 5 online wives, including Claudette and JoJo, Jody, and Jennifer Hill, and I don't even know. All these women are probably cringing, going, "Oh God, no, he didn't say that." All right, we're gonna get going. So I think I let myself get off topic a little bit there, but I'm gonna turn off Chevy's music here because it's just too distracting for me. It's making so I can't think straight. Okay. I'm not gonna bring my old man cane, although this is a cool cane. If you want to see it, that I made. Now I dropped it the other day, and this thing broke off. This horse statue broke off, so I had to wire it on there. It never was wired on there like that before, and I'll fix it. Which all I have to do is put a couple of new bolts through the back here into that to hold it on, and then I can cut that wire off and that won't be on there anymore. This right here is a shifter, a car shifter, which it looks like the battery's dead. Oh, okay, but you see those lights? They light up. So if I'm coming up to get in the house at night and I can't find my key or whatever, I can turn those on when the battery's full, and they'll run. And I do a lot of welding with just like lead that I've melted on the stovetop on a burner in a hot pan, basically, stuff like that. This originally, this post that made up this cane was a giant screw, just heavier than snot. But I was a lot stronger back then, and it got too heavy for me as I got to be more weenie-ish, as I got old and weenie-ish. Okay, so back to the missing 411 clusters of disappearances, and I'm going to start right now. I'm going to go ahead and list a couple more of the profile points that I was talking about yesterday, the weird things that are common to these cases, such as dogs not being able to pick up a scent. That combined with people disappear often with their dogs. That combined with, after a number of days or weeks has gone by, cadaver dogs are brought into an area, and usually by the time you got cadaver dogs, they can smell a cadaver for miles. They can locate a cadaver underwater. I saw a television show where they were using dogs to successfully locate bodies that they'd sunk in like deep water in bays, like where the current's just rushing in and everything. Nonetheless, the dog can actually pinpoint where the cadaver is. It's amazing. So they can smell for long distances. So if you know where someone disappeared, and it's a really rugged area, or it's an area that's basically blocked in by canyon walls, things like that, or it's a 2-year-old kid, the cadaver dog if the regular dogs can't find the person alive in the first few days or whatever, well, after that, or after some inclement weather or whatever, you would think the cadaver dogs would find the people. And oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes it's multiple teams of dogs, and they have no success. And then all of a sudden, the person appears right in the middle of the search zone, or right where they disappeared from initially, or, usually deceased. Sometimes it's after all the searchers have given up and gone home, and it's just a couple. This is quite common, actually. It's just a few family members who are still going out in week 3 or week 4 of the person being missing or whatever, or even the next season, the next year or whatever. And they find the person, and they're right there. They're right there where, it's just not. I'm not, and this author, David Paulides, he's not impugning search and rescue. They tend to do a good job, unlike regular cops. A few times I've seen cops acting in a way that's societally acceptable, or morally acceptable and honorable, is when they're looking. Some of these rural sheriff's departments are looking for missing people. Sometimes some of them pull out all the stops, especially for kids and whatnot. Gives you a little bit different perspective on them. Now, in the meantime, other times of the year or whatever, what they're doing to people, and so you can't just give them a full pass. But you can at least acknowledge that they're not 100% bad. But anyways, so a lot of times these people appear back where these searches happened, or whether that be right after the search is over, or in the middle of the search, or a year later or whatever. And it can't be the case that search and rescue missed these people. They weren't there. That's just all there is to it. Search and rescue people who look where, a lot of times these are people where they've had hundreds and hundreds of people walking pinky, with their hand in hand, or just 2 feet away from each other, and they're running string back and forth through the forest, covering every inch until it looks like a giant spider web that you can't even walk through, and the person's just not there. So the profile points I was talking about, that's one of them. The other one was that the point of separation, where people often just lose sight of each other for a matter of seconds, and somebody goes missing, can't be found. The other one I mentioned was cause of death can't be determined by the coroner, or they give, very often, just to try to quell the concerns of the community, they'll give some BS hypothermia explanation, or some vague thing like exposure, which doesn't really have a medical meaning. And so, interestingly as well, one thing that's interesting about that is when it comes to the cases that I mentioned where he plugged in the profile points and found these cases in cities, and they all turned out to be these like cream of the crop young graduate student males and top athletes and whatnot. In a number of those cases where the bodies were found, which they're not all found, obviously, probably about a third of them were found eventually deceased, or maybe a little more than that. But anyways, the rest are just never seen again. But in the cases where they've been found, the parents in a number of these cases have been unsatisfied with the coroner's pronouncement of cause of death, and so they've called in Cyril Wecht, or one of the other really famous coroners that hires out privately to people and does second opinions, basically. And every single time that's happened, something 6 to 8 times, whatever it's been, something odd has happened. So in the initial screenings that they do when they're doing an autopsy, they don't test for GHB. And one of the reasons for that is GHB leaves the body very quickly. It's very difficult to detect. It's expensive to test for. However, it can be tested for. And in these cases where these people have hired these private coroners to test, to come up with a second opinion on cause of death, they've over and over and over, they've gone ahead and tested for GHB, and they've found massively increased levels of GHB, almost impossibly so. where the person was either heavily dosed with the chemical, or possibly we make GHB in our bodies, so it very well may be that there's someone or some type of entity that has the ability to just give us a massive dose of GHB from our own system, which would explain such a huge great deal of aspects of this phenomenon, if that were the case. Or it could be being delivered aerosol, or if it's not from our own system. But whatever the case, over and over they found these elevated levels of GHB, sometimes almost impossibly high. And if you know what that means, GHB is one of the grapes on dates rugs. And so, and what it does is, very unfortunately, let me take a look at chat here, is it makes it so that you remember everything that's happened to you. You're going to experience all the horror. I don't know if you'll always remember it all, but in many cases you will, and you're definitely going to be conscious and awake and experiencing these horrors, but you just can't move. It's a really horrific thing to think of, especially when these people who went missing. John P., I was just working on your song, buddy. I came up with a new angle for it, but yeah, it's you're next in the quay, buddy. You're next in the quay. Geo's song is out there and published. I noticed you checked into that, and everyone, I hope, goes and listens to my GeoX song. He seems to like it quite a bit, so I'm happy with that. And it's really funny at the very end. You gotta watch it all the way to the end and see the hilariousness at the end. So anyways, yeah, you would experience all the horrors of what was happening to you, but you wouldn't be able to do anything about it. And that explains a lot, especially as far as these cream of the crop young men who are still being found unalive, going missing. No one ever sees them go missing. No one's ever, whatever this phenomenon is, whatever's causing it, they've never screwed up. Well, not exactly. They've never screwed up to where they've been witnessed by witnesses, and people have been able to come and say, hey, this happened to this person. This person walked into a portal in front of us and disappeared. Or this person, a demon came out of a portal in front of us and grabbed this person by the shirt collar and yanked him inside and disappeared. Or a UFO swooped down and grabbed this person, or they fell into a hole in the ground, or they shifted into another. No one, there's never any definitive witnessing of what's going on. So that tells you a lot of things. It tells you that whatever's happening is intelligent and it's watching for the right moment. It's not some random thing like portals opening, which is one theory a lot of people have wanted to push for this phenomenon. If they are portals opening, they're highly controlled portals doing precise things, because they're waiting until nobody's watching and they're taking people, and they're never messing up, and the people are never getting away and coming back and saying, oh, this almost got me. Now, I'm going to put a caveat on that. That's not 100% true. There have been some interesting cases where people apparently got away from different that were happening. Hunters who came up on, and this has been multiple people who've reported this, where they came up on what looked like, all of a sudden the world looked like shimmery and gray or whatever, and they stick their foot forward and their foot vanishes, and they pull it back out, and they're like, nope, not going this way, and they turn around and go the opposite way. Hunters, most of the hunters, these people, they're not the type of people who like to make stuff up. Fantastic. I know fishermen kind of have that reputation, but they're not going to go out and make up stuff like this. And there's so many fascinating cases of similar reports, as well as photographic evidence and video evidence in some cases of, for example, a predator-like creature. In fact, I would just about nearly bet my life on the fact that whoever the author was of the Predator series, or movies, original one at least, had some type of an experience or talked to someone else who did, or whatever, because the exact description of the cloaked predator, not a description of anything like what the alien looks like when it's no longer invisible or whatever, but that cloaked kind of disturbance ripple where you can see the outline of a bipedal creature, and it's jumping from treetop to treetop to treetop. In some cases, it comes up and petite hunters up in tree blocks and stares at them from close range and takes off. It just scares the living daylights out of them. Things like that. And it's been reported so many times by so many sincere people. It can't not be true. That's just, we've got to stop it with this just not believing people, especially when you've got people who are separated by time and geography and they don't know about each other. And you know, these reports have been coming in forever. So a lot of times these things are being dug up in old accounts that you know have been lost to time and academics now for whatever time, and you still get the same consistent reporting. There's also in the newest in the UFO connection, the newest documentary that goes with Missing 411. And John P., if you are not familiar with Missing 411, you could start by watching the third documentary. It's free on YouTube, called The UFO Connection. That's the first time in like 15 years that this author's come out and made a connection with anything. Up until then, people kept on asking him, demanding of him, like, what do you think this is? What is this? And he just refused to take a guess. He's like, I don't know. It can't be this because of this. It can't be that because of that. He could rule out almost everything, but he just didn't want to say what he thought it was that was doing this. And it kind of appears that there's a myriad of things that might be different forms, but they're all kind of doing the same thing to whatever's happening to these people, causing them to disappear, in many cases never to be seen again. And the UFO connection doesn't come flat out say it's ETs that have been doing this whole time. It's just that there are connections that have been made now, and very strong connections. A lot of times when people are found, it appears that they have fallen. Like maybe they're missing for 2 weeks and they're finally found deceased somewhere in an area that's been searched over and over and over again, and it looks like there was a father and daughter. It looked like they'd both broken their necks from a fall from a great height, but where they were at, there was nothing to fall from. There's no way they fell, at least not unless they fell out of a ship or something, or a portal, because there was just nowhere around for them to fall. But they both had injuries consistent with a fall from a great height and broken necks, things like that. And a lot of times, like I said, they'd be missing for 2 weeks, and when they're found, the coroner will often even have to admit that, hey, this person's only been deceased for 24 hours or whatever, and they don't look like they've been outdoors living a hard scrabble life and they're half starved or anything like that. They just look like they were fine one day and then they were deceased. Now they look like that and they never even went missing, things like that. So these connections have been made now. And then there's also a guy who was a survivor. He was elk hunting and he spotted some elk, and he thought it was weird because these elk really weren't moving. And he raised his rifle and he took a shot at them. And his bullet hit some kind of an invisible force field and fell. A bullet which he retrieved later. And I won't tell too much of this story because it's in the UFO Connection documentary, for Missing 411 UFO Connection. Now, I would suggest that you start with the first two documentaries, but if you want to go skip right to the UFO one, you can. But yeah, the bullet was stopped by some kind of an invisible force field. He retrieved that bullet later. He ends up getting abducted, basically, by this aliens, what sounds like aliens. This is just this old guy. I mean, he's like a World War II age. Like, he's not bull BSing. And I don't know if he's alive now, but at the time of the documentary, he was. And just, you just listen to this old guy telling the story. There's just no way he's lying. And he was taken basically in ship, and he was showed what he believed was the Earth from space. And sorry, I was on camera, wasn't I? And then he was dropped. They put him in some kind of a giant, what he thought was like an X-ray like machine, although he didn't hear any humming or anything like that would indicate any machinery, but he just had that feeling about him. And immediately after that, they told him, "You're not what we need." And he said, "But I've got to go home." And they said, "Somebody will take you back." And then the next thing he remembers is he woke up. He had fallen from they had dropped him off from some type of ship or whatever, probably pretty high up in the sky. Now, he got very lucky, and he landed on the side of a hill, and he was out cold already, and he managed not to get his neck broken. I think he might have a broken leg or something, but whatever the case, his story would explain a whole heck of a lot of the way that people have been found. So I'm not saying that's what's behind all of this, or whatever, and I don't think that author is either. It's just a strong connection that's finally been made after all these years of basically refusing to point to anything. Really, the only causes that could be pointed to that couldn't be ruled out were very far-fetched things like people from the future trying to change their timeline by taking out certain individuals. One of the profile points is it tends to be extremely brilliant people, like 4 of the world's top German physicists and the world's top Japanese, I believe, physicists, female, have all disappeared in the North American wilderness in the last decade. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a lot of people who disappear with this phenomenon who have the beginning of Alzheimer's or some type of a mental something that brings them down kind of on the acuity scale, however you want to put it. And there's not a lot of people that are right in the middle. And it's the same thing. There's a lot of much older people and much younger people, and not a lot of people right in that middle age range. And then there's a lot of people that are, it's just kind of like that. A lot of these people that disappear have odd genetic diseases that run in their family. One guy, he was the only sibling that of like 4 who didn't get this terrible genetic disorder that basically ruins and ends your life pretty young. He disappeared. It's often doctors. Doctors are a subcategory of people who disappear. So are long distance runners. So are hunters. So are, oh boy, there's just a whole bunch of them. Just these people just disappearing over and over and over. It's almost like these cases are cookie cutters of each other. It's eerie. But here, one is in Alaska, one's in Florida, one's in New Zealand, one's in South America. So yes, he did expand globally at one point. Now he's obviously hampered by the ability to get information from certain countries and translation issues, etc. But that not everywhere has Freedom of Information Act, and even getting information from Canada, he had to have a Canadian citizen do that. So he did take it worldwide though, and yeah, it's just very eerie how and not only that, these cases go back around 275 years, and you see these same patterns repeating over and over and over again. And you can almost look at this author, at least has so much experience with this. He's cataloged so many thousands of these cases that each one's stranger than the next, that you can tell him the circumstances under which somebody disappeared, and most of the time he can tell you when they're going to be found, where they're going to be found, and in what condition, alive, deceased, whatever. And he's done that. He's sensitive to the families of missing people. Nonetheless, there have been a number of high-profile cases where the people have come and asked him, and he's just said, well, I've seen this set of circumstances X, Y, and Z over here and over so many times, and unfortunately, the people who disappear under these circumstances are never found alive. or their bodies are never recovered, and he's been right basically every single time. Or there was one case where he was like, it's been 12 days now, he should be found in the next day or two of his search. And boom, sure enough, that was the firefighter who went missing in the Colorado wilderness, who had unbelievable numbers of people out looking for him. And yeah, so this author has managed to do that because he's just seen this over and over and over again. So there's really no doubt, the more that you look into this phenomenon, and there are naysayers online, I have listened to what they have to say. They're full of it. They don't want this to be true. It's terrifying. It's just their denials are just kind of the standard type of denial that I see from people who just refuse to accept and acknowledge that there are any cryptid species that exist, and things like that. People who've decided they have information that is 100% correct and outweighs any evidence that might come their way to the contrary, even though those facts they believe they have are not based on anything concrete. So yeah, the more you look at this phenomenon, the more you see it is definitely a real phenomenon. There's an intelligence behind it. I was saying that the people in the future trying to monkey with the past, or with their timeline by monkeying with people in the past, because you can imagine they might take out this physicist here who was going to invent some kind of a new weapon to stop that from happening, or technology that's that good that they can actually look back in time and go back to a point in time to try to make an alteration. Then they also can probably calculate that, hey, I can take out this person over here who's got Alzheimer's, or this, I mean, it's sad to say it, but like somebody with Down syndrome over here or whatever, because that a lot of times these people end up being, having some kind of a disorder like that or whatever. And then so they say, well, I don't have to take out this exact physicist, I can do the calculations, I can take out this other person and get the same effect. That's just one far out there theory, but it's one of the few. The other ones would be like demons opening, or extraterrestrials or something opening up portals, grabbing people and yanking them in for whatever purposes. That's another one that couldn't be completely discounted. Because when it comes to the idea of Sasquatch being behind all this, Dogman being behind all this, blah, blah, blah. Now, there are cases that have details that make you wonder. But generally speaking, those can't be the answers. Because these cases are definitely linked. And they definitely are very deliberate. And the details of them match over and over and over. And a lot of them, I mean, I don't think that Sasquatch is coming into the city to take graduate school all-stars and athletic all-stars from colleges for some reason. I just don't. And there's a whole lot of other reasons too why. There's never, the dogs that go to search for these people, they've never ended up picking up Sasquatch tracks or whatever. There are some cases where the dogs track for a while, and then it turns out, then when the person's found later on, that they had gone the complete opposite way, etc., etc. But anyways, there's very few explanations that are there are very few hypothetical explanations for this phenomenon that can fit, and that aren't just completely destroyed by some element or another there that we see there that wouldn't make sense with it. So yeah, I'm going to talk about just a couple of cases really quick. One was a physicist, a female physicist from Asia somewhere, and she was like one of the world's top physicists, and she was in Yosemite with her boyfriend, who was an attaché, some kind of an attaché for her country or something. And anyways, they rented horses for the day there in Yosemite, which I mentioned before. Yosemite is the biggest missing people's cluster of all. It's ongoing. It's been nonstop for centuries. It's eerie that people just go missing there like crazy. And so anyways, they get separated somehow and she loses her horse right away. Now what ends up happening is the weather when they set out was perfectly fine and there was no forecasted bad weather. Now this is another profile point. When these people go missing, very, very often the weather suddenly takes a terrible turn, and almost always a completely unforecasted one. Now if that ain't weird, I don't know what is. But it is true. You can see it over and over again. So there was no forecasted weather event, but somehow this freak storm thing rolls in. And she, later on, talking to the boyfriend, he's just like, I don't know. They want to know how they got separated on their horses like that. He said, I don't know. We just weren't together all of a sudden, which is weird, you know. Most of these horses, you rent a pair of them like that, they're basically trained to stay together. But whatever, they got separated, and so he goes in, and she's out there, and she has a cell phone on her, but the weather's starting to change, and she calls in and says, hey, I am lost. I've been separated from my boyfriend, and I need some help getting out of here. And they say, oh, we are looking for you actively right now. There are people out there looking for you, but we need to ping your cell phone and find out where you are so we can come right to you. But in order to do that, you've got to call the 911 system. You've called the non-emergency line. And she says, no, ma'am, I've called 911. She's like, my phone is getting low on juice here too, but I most definitely. And the lady's like, no, you didn't. You called the non-emergency number. You got to call back. We'll be able to triangulate your position. She hangs up, calls back 911. Operator's like, no, honey, the emergency line. And she's like, I'm not an idiot. I'm one of the world's top physicists. I'm freaking 1-1. And so they have this little kind of a argument that goes on, and she agrees to try again. And this happens 9 times in a row. Her battery's getting low. The weather's starting to pick up more and more and more, and the reports of what's coming in the weather are getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, on the 10th attempt that she makes to call on the emergency system so they can triangulate her position, the call goes through correctly. Now, I'm just going to pause really quick and tell you that they looked into it after this incident, and both before this happened, that was never a glitch that was ever reported in their phone system ever before, and it hasn't happened since. So it's very odd. But on the 10th time, she's called 911, just like for some reason now it works. So they're like, okay, now we know where you are. They're like, oh shoot, you're in a kind of a bad area, but we're going to send a helicopter to come get you. And they tell her just hold on, and they have her hang up because her battery's getting low or whatever. And they go to get the pilot who's on duty, to fly out and get this woman. And now usually these pilots, when they know where somebody is or whatever, and the weather's getting too bad to fly or whatever, and people tell them, no, you can't fly in this, these are the type of people who will say, F you, take my license, I'm going to get this person. That's the type of people these usually are. This pilot, in an extremely unusual manner, is real grumpy, and he refuses to go. He says, it's starting to rain. I'm not going. Look at the weather forecast. It's forecast to get a lot worse. I'm not taking the bird out in this. And risking my life for it. So they have to call another pilot in who lives like an hour and a half away. So they do that. They call her back. They let her know what's going on. This other pilot's coming into town. Meanwhile, the weather's getting worse and worse and worse. And the pilot gets there, the replacement pilot, and he goes out. With the spotter who would have also ridden out with the original helicopter pilot. And they head out. But they've been trying this entire time. Many of you out there probably already know. You cannot land a helicopter in a national park or any kind of you better be crashing and certain to die if you're going to emergency land a plane or a helicopter in a park, because you're probably going to prison for life. They're very serious about it. And so they go out and they can't get permission. They're trying to find somebody to get permission to land and pick this girl up. And they can't seem to reach anyone who has the authority to grant them permission to land. And so what they do is they tell her, look, what we're going to do is, you're near a particular bluff. We need you to go up high on this thing, and you're going to have to trust the spotter. They're going to pull the helicopter up off the edge of this ledge. You're going to the spotter's going to be out on the skids of the helicopter with a harness on. He will catch you. You need to trust him. You're going to have to run and jump into his arms. It's not going to jump. The pilot can get to within 10, 15 feet. You're going to have to pluck up the courage and do this, though. We need your help. And she says, okay. So meanwhile, the storm's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. It's starting to blow like crazy. Wind's blowing like crazy. Rain is so thick you can barely see. And now there were people who were on a bluff that it was miles and miles and miles away, but they had little binocular things on it, and people had their own devices and whatnot. So there were some people who were able to watch what happened that day with the helicopter rescue. And they but what they said is that the helicopter pulled up to the ledge and the woman hesitated a bit. She didn't want to do it, run and jump. But the spotter was out there and he's yelling, jump, come on, come to me. And she finally goes for it, and she runs and she jumps and she lands right in his arm, and he catches her just perfectly. Well, different people said different things. Some people said nothing happened. Other people said there was a sudden gust of wind. Whatever the case, the minute that she lands on the skids with the spotter and he catches her, the helicopter falls from the air and rolls down the face of the cliff. Rolls many times, hundreds of feet down, to crash on the rocky ground below. The spotter is thrown clear. He lives, but he's broken to pieces. The pilot is deceased and the woman is deceased. And they don't really have an explanation. People said it almost looked like the helicopter got flicked by a giant hand or something. Whatever the case, you kind of have to get this eerie sense. Now, I left a whole lot of details out of that story, details that show a consistent that day, one obstacle after another, from her phone not getting service to, them getting separated, to her losing her horse, to the phone not being able to dial into 911, to them having to get the replacement pilot, to them not being able to get permission to land, etc., etc. It was like something was throwing up roadblock after roadblock and telling this woman, I didn't want to let her off the mountain alive. And when it looked like she was going to beat this whole thing and get out of there, she landed in the arms of the spotter. Whatever this force was said, nope, I told you, and just flicked the helicopter down to the ground. I don't know how else to really look at that situation. And like I said, I was just saying, I left out a number of other little details of similar type of things that were going on that were just hampering this woman from any chance of getting off of that mountain alive. And things that statistically, for all of these things to happen by chance, is basically impossible. I would say it is impossible, or very close to it. About the same odds as a tornado blowing through a junkyard and creating a working fighter jet, or at least a working bicycle. And so these are the type of things that you've got going on here with this phenomenon. That's just one case. I'm going to end this live stream a little earlier, a little faster than usual. I'm not going to babble on as long as I usually do. Now I'm going to go to the comment section and look for any questions or comments, and I will return to this subject a little more tomorrow with some more individual stories and more information about the profile points. And really quickly, one other thing about this is, in many of these cases, the FBI has shown up. Now, the FBI doesn't investigate missing people unless it is very young people. I think is the one caveat. Otherwise, they don't look for missing people. And the FBI have shown up over and over and over, especially in the case of these missing kids, which of course that would jive with disappearances of small children. But nonetheless, they've also shown up in the disappearance cases of other people, including a very old hunting man who's in the you should watch the second documentary, the Hunters documentary, Missing 411, The Hunters. This guy's story is in there, and boy, it's crazy that, I mean, it's just impossible that he disappeared. But anyways, the FBI showed up on that case as well. They're not supposed to be researching the disappearance of old people, not unless they either go across multiple state lines or they're very young children. So anyways, I'll talk about all this more. I'm going to look at the comments here and see if there's any questions or anything like that. So I've seen videos of orbs and black holes. I have seen USA Inc. I've seen if you want to look up at Scott Carpenter's footage. Now, he was out there mostly trying to film Sasquatch initially, but he filmed Dogmans, he filmed portals opening up, he filmed portals with things coming through them, portals with beings on the other side of them, all kinds of stuff. He filmed something that looks like an alien, but standing so close to an alien, insectoid alien, but it's standing so close to the camera lens that you can't really tell what it is. But at one point, it blinks its eye, and it's got this really slow blink that goes way down on its eye and way back up all slow. And you're like, if you thought it was fake before that, you're like, oh my God, this thing is real. But anyways, Scott Carpenter, he's passed on now. He's one of the guys from the Sasquatch Genome Project who got a lot of the hair samples. He did a lot of ingenious things like putting packing tape backwards on trees with like bacon grease all smeared on the tree right next to it or whatever, so that the packing tape would stick and grab clumps of hair and with follicles, because you need to have follicles with Sasquatch because they don't have that medulla usually inside their hair. And he got the candy wrappers because he realized that if he left candy bar wrappers out there, they wouldn't open the wrappers and eat the candy bar. Never. Every single time they would put the whole thing in their mouth and chew it up and spit it out, and that was quite clear from the wrappers that he found up there. So he figured, I'll do that and I'll get saliva, and he did. Anyways, he has a lot of footage that he never even had a chance to go through before he passed on. But yeah, if you look at the footage that he does have, you will see footage of things like that: portals, black holes, whatever you want to call them. Let me see here. Yeah, and I didn't want to talk about your sighting there, USA Inc., because I wasn't sure how public that was or whatever. If you want me to, I will mention a little bit about it, although I'm not nearly as versed in it as you are. But you have a very, what I would say is almost assuredly some type of non-human technology sighting, right? Let's see here. Watch the channel Redacted for the best coverage. Let's see. Good evening, USA Inc. Juggles. Hey, Juggles. Those 25. When your number's up, your number's up. Yeah, that's true, Oz. Let's OTVO. There's an app for that, Jeff. Are you referring to Jeff's? Let me see here. I'm gonna look back. Good evening, Juggles. Let's Jeff. I can't see what you're referring to. The Monopoly guy definitely wore a monocle, so now you're talking about the Mandela effect. Oh yes, I see Mandela effect. I'm not so convinced that the Mandela effect is real. I think it's possible. I just don't see how, if it is real, that there would be little like remnants of it here and there where things didn't change when every version of the Berenstain Bears changed to the Berenstain Bears, but except for there's some TV guide listing from 1985 that didn't change. That doesn't make sense. Your back was frozen, Ryan Labs? Whose back was frozen? I was frozen. Mine was frozen? Huh. Okay, well, I'm going to end this pretty soon. I don't see any particularly urgent questions here right now. I'll be back to talk about more about this phenomenon, answer any questions that you all come up with. Hopefully, any of you who are really interested at all will go and look into this on your own. Like I said, there's the 3 documentaries, Missing 411 documentaries. They're all very, very good. And then there's also almost endless hours of this author telling these various stories on Coast to Coast and other paranormal podcasts and radio programs. And oh boy, there's a couple of them I kind of wish I would have started with that I'm very, very excited to tell in the next day or two. Cases that are just, but I mean, these cases are still being found every day that fit this and also they're occurring all the time. New cases are occurring, but also cases, because the information age is fairly new. There's still a lot of microfiche newspaper stories and whatnot from the past couple hundred years that even from 6 decades ago or 5 decades ago, or even that aren't online. So especially at the beginning of writing the books, they had to go around library to library and look through and just dig through microfiche and all kinds of stuff like that to find these cases. And so, yeah, I'm excited to tell about a couple of these cases. They're just bizarre, but they're still happening. I don't mean to talk about it like it's a past phenomenon. It's if anything, it's picking up. But I think it's not necessarily picking up so much as it's just we now have the communications and monitoring to do a much better job of noticing it happening. And now that it's also just having the phenomenon be known about by millions of people, means that there's more people who, when these cases happen, they might call this author. The family might call this author, or the authorities might call this author and say, hey, we've got this missing person. We've been looking for him for a couple of days. The dog can't find a scent. What would you suggest? Things like that happens. So, yeah, these are ongoing. I don't know if they're picking up, but I think that's just, we have a better way of knowing that they're happening. But they could be picking up as well. I don't know. I can't answer that. And again, I'll come back and talk about some more of them tomorrow. I got some really, really cool ones to talk about. Really crazy, crazy disappearances. So many of them, it's just like, it almost seems impossible, a lot of them. You just gotta go scratch your head and go, where did this person freaking go? There's nowhere to go in a lot of these cases. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Thank you for everybody who's stuck with me. Everett Sanchez, USA Inc., Ryan Labs. Everyone make sure get each other's channels. I'm sure you've already done that. Mr. Bones is Marianne Cubo. Good to see you there. Juggalasis, Jeff. Everybody who was in here, Let's, OTVO, various other people. I even see a few people who aren't modded. You can mod any of those people you USA Inc. if they look like they're okay people. Thanks, Everett. I appreciate that. Everybody, yes, everyone take care of each other. We lost Swamp Fox News. Hopefully we won't lose anyone else in the near future. Hopefully I won't. If I drop, I expect the whole community to have like many days of mourning. Many days of mourning. If you hear that I dropped, the whole world better be freaking sad, or I'm going to be peeved, and I'm going to haunt all of you and show up and scare the pee out of you. All right, everybody. We'll pick this up tomorrow, right around 4:20. 4:20, dude. Rock on. Have a good one. Later, let's make sure and check out your. I think you already saw my comment under your comment section. Yeah, you get a honorable mention there in the Geo song, so make sure and check that out. And everyone, make sure and watch to the end of that Geo song, because there's a funny little clip I put in there at the end. All right, talk to y'all tomorrow. WassamattaU loves you. WassamattaU loves you, baby.